Good Wednesday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. Browns have some folks out in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Let's welcome in Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Mary Kay, big news is the Ken Dorsey hire, offensive coordinator. Just your thoughts on that. You know, there were a number of candidates that interviewed, and there are still a number of teams that need offensive coordinators. Browns end up with Ken Dorsey. What do you think went into that, and your thoughts on the hire?
Well, you know, I think the biggest thing is that he was able to do tremendous things with both Cam Newton and Josh Allen. He really helped both of those guys develop in their careers and become, in Cam's case, MVP of the NFL, and in Josh's case, runner-up. With Josh, he had to take sort of a sometimes a little bit wild, erratic type of quarterback and rein him in a little bit and try to get the most out of him. And he really worked wonders with him. And Josh flourished under Ken Dorsey. So I really do think that, that there's sort of a vibe or feeling that he took the fall a little bit more than he should have in Buffalo for that 5-5 start of theirs. And that, perhaps he's a lot better coordinator than it might seem when you look at that.
Yeah, and we've gone through the numbers that kind of indicate the offense didn't really get any better other than they weren't turning the ball over as much. Here's the thing. Do you think Kevin Stefanski still calls plays? Does it really matter? I mean, they've now assembled between Deuce Staley, Tommy Rees, and Ken Dorsey, reportedly, some new ideas and some different thoughts on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that play calling matters. I do believe that it does. And I don't know if Kevin's going to do it or if he'll turn it over. That has yet to be determined, and we are probably going to talk to Ken Dorsey, I think, probably sometime next week. So we'll have a better handle on that then. But, either he can do it or Kevin can do it. It'll be one of the two of them. And, they could also collaborate on it in some ways. So, again, the important part is, as you mentioned, the fact that, they've overhauled the offensive staff. They really have completely transformed it. And it's all geared towards, getting the most out of Deshaun Watson and having some new, fresh ideas and new ways of doing things. And Ken will certainly bring that.
Does the fact that he worked with mobile quarterbacks, is that kind of the key takeaway that, you hear that with Newton and Josh Allen? Is that something that they're looking to capitalize on with Deshaun Watson? He's obviously mobile.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. That really has a lot to do with it. The fact that there is some crossover, there are some similarities. He's not as big as those guys, but he definitely is a bigger quarterback, and he definitely is tough and a tough runner that'll kind of sacrifice his body a little bit, maybe sometimes too much, but definitely there are some things that he can do that those guys can do, and Ken is going to bring that to the table. He's got experience in the spread with the RPOs and in the drop back game.
All right, so this from Dog Pound Daily, 3 players who will benefit the most from the Ken Dorsey hiring. Number 3, they say David Njoku, and he really turned it on late in the year. You think about Buffalo, Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, who they drafted, so that's Ken Dorsey's tight ends, the last stop. Elijah Moore, number 2. The Browns definitely trying to find a way to get him more involved. He might have suffered by having 4 different starting quarterbacks. And number 1, pretty obvious, Deshaun Watson. We've talked about it a little bit, about the mobile background that Dorsey has with him. Do you see where they're getting with all 3 of those guys that could potentially benefit from Ken Dorsey's offense or as the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I think so. Once again, they wanted to spin this offense forward, and I think that's one of the reasons why they moved on from Alex Van Pelt. And because I think they want to have more of the spread vibe, more of the the RPOs and some of the different things that that you've seen. I think that Tommy Rees will bring up some concepts from the college game. He was offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, and a former quarterback himself. So I think you're going to get some really good new ideas there. So yeah, I think all of those guys will benefit. But I mean, when you look at David Njoku, he's certainly benefited just from having Joe Flacco out there. So, just a guy, with a big arm that can get the ball into the hands of his playmakers, that is certainly a key.
So late last week, we heard Deshaun Watson on a podcast kind of trying to recruit T. Higgins, who could potentially reach free agency from the Bengals. This comes from Duke Tobin, Bengals executive, on T. Higgins. I want T back. Everyone on our whole team wants T back. But there's a pie, and there are things we can do and can't do because of it. We'll see. Again, that's being attributed to Duke Tobin, Bengals executive. Mary Kay, when you look at it, Joe Burrow got they're going to pay Jamar Chase without question. And they do have some guys on the defensive side of the ball. Can you see the Browns pursuing T. Higgins?
Possibly, if he becomes available, but there is a chance that they can franchise him. There are ways that they can work around that and try to keep him. They can maybe try to restructure Joe Burrow's contract in the same way that the Browns have done every year with Deshaun's to create more cap space. They're going to want Joe Burrow to come back and be comfortable and have his supporting cast and have as much talent around him as he possibly can. And so I think they're probably going to make an effort to keep T. But if he ends up out there, then of course, you'd have to look at the cost of all of that. But, I'm sure he's somebody that would be on the radar if they can go that route.
So you also tweeted this out. Browns cornerback coach Brandon Lynch has interviewed for the Titans defensive coordinator vacancy. Lynch helped the Browns become #1 pass defense this past season. So that's a young guy that really haven't heard a lot about. That's very well thought of. Apparently, you see that the interview went well, and people are intrigued by Lynch. So that's a young up-and-coming coach on the Browns staff.
Yeah, he's really good, and he deserves to get that interview. And it would be a big loss for the Browns if they do lose him. He's great at his job. The players absolutely love him. They'd run through a wall for him, and he is one of those up-and-coming coaches in the NFL. So hopefully, it would be great for him if he gets that job, but also it would be nice for the Browns if they can keep him. So we'll see how that goes.
All right. The other thing before we go to break, some news that you tweeted out a little bit earlier. Kareem Hunt, who led the Browns 9 rushing touchdowns, 2 in that wild card loss to the Texans, underwent a sports hernia surgery to repair an abductor. Hunt will be a free agent. That might explain a little bit why we didn't see quite as much of explosion in his running. So you certainly hope Kareem Hunt is good, but I think everybody kind of expected him to go out and test free agency again this year.
Yes, that will happen. He's even said that will happen. So you can expect that come March. And, he's going to have to go out and pass the physical now, but he should be fine within 8 weeks from this surgery. But it does explain a lot. And, you have to give him so much credit for going out there and scoring 4 rushing touchdowns in his last 5 games of the regular season, and then scoring the only 2 touchdowns in the playoff game. So, he always gives his heart and soul for the Cleveland Browns, loves his hometown team. And, if it's goodbye, he certainly gave it his all. Yeah, still a very effective short yardage runner, runs hard without question. Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for Plain Daily, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We'll talk a little bit about some free agents that could be out there. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
You might have expected all the games, and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in 1. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for The Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Good morning. You're talking to a Brownie fan since the first game September 46. I heard that game on radio and following the team ever since. I will repeat to you one more time. Shaproth and Wooten to the left, Morrow in the middle, Hickerson and Clark to the right, Brewer in tight. None of these defenses today could penetrate that line. None of these defenses. They should bring back Flacco, and they should bring back Kareem Hunt, and they should basically find themselves another top receiver if that's possible. All right. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Mary Kay, we talked a little bit about Kareem Hunt. We've talked in the past about Flacco. I don't think the Browns are against it. It's got to work out. Wide receiver is something I think you said all season long. They need another guy to go with Amari Cooper.
I think they do. I don't know that they necessarily agree with me on that because I think they look at their pass catching core globally. And I think they look at the fact that they've got Amari and David Njoku as the two pillars of that pass catching core. So I don't know that they're going to go out and spend a bunch of money on a T. Higgins or a Calvin Ridley or someone like that. But I do think that they should because, when you have an injury, if you had to do without one of those two guys for any length of time, then you would be hurting. I would prefer for them to have the kind of model that you have seen in Cincinnati for a while, where you've got a number of really good receivers and in other places where you also have that. So I don't think you can give Deshaun too many weapons. I think you have to supply him with as many as you possibly can. This past year, I thought they should have had, DeAndre Hopkins on the roster. Again, obviously they didn't agree with me on that, but I still think they could use a T, a Calvin, a Mike Evans, or somebody else along those lines. I don't know if it'll happen.
Yeah, is it fair to say the structure of the offense, the changing of the structure of the offense, is aimed at trying to find out how you can maximize Deshaun Watson? That was kind of when I looked at it, I'm like, they're trying to figure out how to make this work with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, they have been doing that. They have been trying to figure that out, but I feel like this is their effort to take it to the next level. And their offensive coordinator in Alex Van Pelt was very, very steeped in, that older style West Coast offense, the traditional West Coast offense. And I think that they're trying to go away from that kind of thing a little bit more. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be, a lot more different kinds of concepts than we've seen before. I think there will be, it'll be more creative. It'll be pushing it forward, spinning it forward, maybe more, 3 wides, maybe sometimes 4 wides. I mean, you're just going to see a lot of different things that showcase Deshaun's skills and abilities.
So as it currently stands, Browns are projected to be over the salary cap. So that comes to restructuring. I know you've been asked this in your Hey Mary Kay's. What do you think about the possibility of restructuring? Who makes sense from that standpoint as far as contracts go?
Well, I guess they'll have to see if there's anything they can do with Deshaun's $64 million cap charge. And then you've got Amari's $24 million cap charge. You've got Nick Chubb that you have to figure out what you can do with him from the standpoint of what makes sense for, bringing him back and also having it make fiscal sense to the club and to him. So these are some that they'll take a look at, but there are others. I mean, if they need money, they can find a way to dig into their pockets, come up with a roster bonus, spread out the contract with void years, lower the cap number. I mean, that's what these guys do. They're the masters of it. And if they want to sign some free agents or make a trade, they'll be able to do it.
Yeah, Andrew Berry said as much when you had talked to him at the end of the year. All right, this from Pro Football Focus. It's kind of interesting. Potential landing spots for 2024 free agent quarterbacks and wide receivers is the thing. Now, they have KJ Osborne from the Vikings. Potential landing spots, Ravens and Browns with Marquise Goodwin, James Prochet, Jakeem Grant. All free agents. Former Vikings offensive coordinator Kevin Stefanski recruits a Viking he didn't coach, but perhaps he helped scout before taking the head coaching job for the Browns. Comparison is Paris Campbell. Mary Kay, Osborne is kind of a younger guy, kind of still developing, and they went, they had Justin Jefferson, they got Jordan Addison, and he kind of got pushed back a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that any free agent receivers that end up out there and are available, the Browns will do their due diligence on them. And if they have a connection like the one Osborne has with Kevin Stefanski, that's an obvious place to look for someone that might, actually, fit your scheme, fit what you'd like to do. And most of all, they must fit with Deshaun Watson. And I think that's where Elijah Moore comes in this year. I still think that the Browns feel like he has more to offer and that there's more left in that tank when it comes to pairing him with Deshaun. And I think that some of these new concepts that you'll see offensively will help bring out the best in Elijah as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that he might have been hurt more than most by 4 different quarterbacks just because of his style. This is kind of interesting as well. Some more free agents from playoff teams, projected landing spots. This is from CBSSports.com. Gabe Davis, projected team the Browns. Likely to draw outside interest as a top flight if inconsistent speedster. Old coordinator Ken Dorsey is now in Cleveland. And then they also go with Fletcher Cox, projected team Browns. Actually looked refreshed on an otherwise sad 2023 defense. Is it turn the page time in Philly? And how about a reunion with old friend Jim Schwartz? Both of those do make sense. Gabe Davis was a guy that used to show up. They called him Big Game Gabe because playoffs, big games, he used to make huge catches.
Yeah, I mean, once again, when you have these kinds of connections, when you've got someone that Ken Dorsey coached, when you've got someone that Jim Schwartz coached and loved, and vice versa on the parts of the players, then there's always going to be that natural connection. But, the front office obviously is going to have to feel the same way. They're going to have to look at it and say, yeah, this is a fit. And so we'll have to see with some of those guys. I don't know. That they have room for a Fletcher Cox on this team right now. I think they're pretty happy with, their defensive front for the most part. I don't know if a big money acquisition is what they're going to be going for there, but we'll have to see. And then again, from a receiver standpoint, if they do add a receiver in free agency or in a trade, I would have to think that it would be one that is not going to break the bank. They'd have to add someone more in that mid-level range of wide receivers because, again, Amari is kind of up there.
Would you imagine it's kind of a bigger body guy? It seems like, and I'm thinking DeAndre Hopkins, and even in college, like a Mike Williams, Deshaun seems to have, that 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" guy. He puts it up there and finds a way to let him go get it.
Well, that is true, but the Browns do also have a tendency to use their tight ends in that way. So, David Njoku is almost more like that, that big body receiver. So if you don't end up with one like that, you do have David that is really in your pass catching group, almost in your receiver group. So, they could go for a guy like that. But if they don't, they already have one.
All right, before we go to break, some more news from across the NFL. The Seattle Seahawks are getting ready to hire defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald as their new head coach. Still finalizing the deal, but Seattle has its man. Macdonald, 36, now becomes the youngest NFL head coach. And Browns fans are probably thrilled that defensive coordinator from the Ravens is out of the division because he did a heck of a job with the Ravens D this year.
He really did. And coordinators make a difference. You saw that when Jim Schwartz came in here. So, that could really, really be a tremendous loss for the Baltimore Ravens unless they can find another Mike Macdonald. He was phenomenal for that defense. Guys obviously loved playing for him. When you're getting that kind of production out of the Jadeveon Clowneys and the Roquan Smiths and those kinds of guys, then something's going right over there. So that's big news for the AFC North.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the plain dealer in cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, plus some trends CBS Sports will carry forward in the NFL. Sports for CLE, right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for The Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
How you doing? Love the show, as always. I just wanted to touch in and comment on us and Deshaun Watson trying to cater to his abilities, which I completely get. The thing that I'm concerned with is talking about his mobility and being a running quarterback. And I just think that at this stage in his career and with his propensity to get injuries and being unwilling to slide and all of that, we need to be really trying to get somebody that's going to come in and work with him on maneuvering in the pocket, looking to throw on time. He's got a great arm. He's very accurate. And I think that he needs to be transitioned into a pure passing quarterback where to use his mobility only in necessity as opposed to looking to scramble for runs and rush yards. All right, thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Mary Kay, he really hadn't been injured a lot until this season with the Browns, but I get the thought. Obviously, you don't want your quarterback taking hits anyway.
No, you really don't. And it's going to be interesting to see how they move forward because, as we mentioned before, you've got Ken Dorsey, who coached kamikaze Josh Allen, who would just sacrifice his body on every single play and never, ever once gave a thought to trying to sacrifice himself or stay healthy, although he does slide and does do a pretty good job of it. And the same thing with Cam Newton. These guys are difference makers, playmakers that will, do what it takes to make the play. And Deshaun is the exact same way. So, we'll see. Somehow they have to try to strike the balance between him being able to do all of that and also keeping him healthy. Because the last thing that you want next year is for him to miss 11 games again. They cannot afford that.
Yeah, without question. And keep in mind, Deshaun Watson is used to being athletic and using his legs. You don't want him to be thinking. You want him to go out and play. That's part of his game. But I agree with you. You can't be taking hits from guys that are 150 pounds heavier than you. I know you wrote an article about this, and we had heard it on this show when you were on last week. Will Deshaun Watson, he said he's not a fan of the scripted plays. Is that something you think they work out with Ken Dorsey?
Well, I think there will be scripted plays, but I definitely think it's worth a conversation. And I'm sure the coaches would agree with this too. If you have a quarterback who expresses something like that, then, I think it's something that you at least have to talk about and come to an understanding. Because if he's harboring, hey, I hate these scripted plays, you can't have that. I mean, you just can't have a quarterback feeling that way about something and then just go out and expect him to perform in the early part of the game. And I did the analysis to look back and, I looked at all of his first drives and in some cases his second and third drives. And, they were not that impressive with him. They just weren't. He threw 2 pick sixes in 2 of his 6 starts. That's 33.3% of the time he threw a pick 6 on a start this past season. That's obviously way too many. And then he only put 1 first drive touchdown on the board in his 6 starts. And then you look at Joe Flacco, he put 4 touchdowns, first drive touchdowns on the board in his 5 starts for 80%. Deshaun, 16%. So there's something there that needs to be addressed and looked at. And maybe it's as simple as hey, let's just make sure we all go to, work together on these scripted plays so you're super comfortable with what we have going here. Maybe there just needs to be more communication in that regard. But whatever the case may be, they have to talk about it.
Yeah, and again, to your point, you don't want your quarterback to feel like the first 2 drives he's handcuffed by the plays that he has to run. That's in essence, that's what he's saying. He's, that they defend him differently. This one from CBS Sports, and they're very interesting. Trends that will carry over into the 2024 season. First one, they go motion, motion, and more motion. The 2 Super Bowl participants finished the regular season top 5 in motion rate. 49ers motioned on a seismic 70.4% of their offensive play, second highest rate in the league. Chiefs came in 4th, 60.5. Browns had the second fewest plays that had pre-motion this year. Only the Eagles had fewer. And the other one is Long Live Yak. The number 1 and number 2 teams in the yard after catch per reception are in the Super Bowl. 49ers led that category 6 consecutive years that they've led it. Chiefs have registered the most total yards after catch in each of the past 4 seasons during the regular season. Mary Kay, I think Ken Dorsey and Tommy Rees are a couple of guys that are brought in to kind of incorporate motion and yard after catch.
Yes, absolutely. And again, these are the new, fresh ideas that we're talking about. These are bringing something different to the table. I mean, if you're, second last in the NFL in motion, pre-snap motion, and you're seeing that the Super Bowl teams are way up at the top as number 1 and number 2. I mean, that is a trend that, you want to be on the right side of that. And that's exactly why they're making some of these offensive changes that they are.
So I know you've addressed this in one of your Hail Mary case. Curious your thoughts. Do you think Kevin Stefanski gets an extension soon?
I do. I really do. I think that could happen pretty much, at any time. I think they're just trying to put the finishing touches on the staff and make sure that they have that in the kind of shape that they want it in. But I think probably pretty soon after that, you'll see him get that extension that he deserves.
Would you expect Andrew Berry as well? I mean, think about where the franchise was before each of those 2 guys and where it is now.
Yeah, and Kevin's probably going to win his second AP NFL Coach of the Year award coming up here on February 8th. So that's pretty remarkable. And if that doesn't shout extension, I don't know what does.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com as always. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Mary Kay.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Mary Kay Cabot, make sure you check her out. Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Best Browns coverage that you'll find here in town. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. We'll look a little bit at some free agency and draft people. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in 1. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America,
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Senior Bowl underway out in Mobile, Alabama. At least the practices are, day 2 of practices. This comes from Mac. Why Browns fans should pay attention to the Senior Bowl this week. These are wide receivers that were out in Mobile at the Senior Bowl last year. Tank Dell had a great year for the Texans. Rashee Rice, great year for the Chiefs. Puka Nakaya, that's the Rookie of the Year for the Rams, and Jaden Reed from Green Bay, all at the Senior Bowl in Mobile a year ago. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, we'll get into some of the receivers out at the Senior Bowl, but that's a pretty darn impressive list when you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, one of those guys is in the Super Bowl. The other two of the other guys made the playoff. Well, 3 of those guys were on playoff teams, one of whom, and Tank Dell, suffered an unfortunate leg injury, but, he was really good. And I think it just goes to show the value of the Senior Bowl and what it can mean as far as, getting the exposure in front of pro coaches. And even looking at the list of guys available for this year's Senior Bowl, the number of names on here is staggering if you follow the draft. Just to name a few: Malachi Corley of Western Kentucky, Xavier Legette of South Carolina, Ladd McConkey of Georgia, Ricky Pearsall of Florida, Brendan Rice from USC, Devontae Walker from UNC, Roman Wilson from Michigan. I could just go on, but this is a stacked group of receivers out there in Mobile, so it shouldn't be surprising you're seeing so many of those guys popping those highlight reels you're seeing on social media.
All right, so you've already kind of looked at position groupings and some of the people in this. Take us through your position rankings, position grouping rankings for the NFL draft, and I know you wrote an article about it.
Yeah, let's start right at the top with number 1, wide receiver. People that know me and that know my stuff know I am very skill position oriented. I love talking about skill players all the time. And to me, this wide receiver class, if it's not generational, it's pretty close, because you have right at the top Marvin Harrison Jr., who might be the most talented player, where the only reason he's not going to go number 1 or probably even in the top 3 is simply because he doesn't play quarterback. That's pretty much it. Then you got 2 other top 10 guys in Washington's Rome Odunze and LSU's Malik Neighbors, who should be top 10 guys. And you look up and down the draft board, top 50, top 75, top 100. Receivers can go all over the place. I don't exactly have the number of how many of those guys can go up there, but it's staggering just how good that group is. Now, obviously, you can go to my post on cleveland.com to look at all these positions. I'll spotlight a couple others. Quarterback number 2, obviously, Caleb Williams and Drake May. Feels like we've been talking about them forever. As 1 and 2 just depends on your personal preference, almost who you like 1 and 2. Whether you like the more prototypical dual threat type guy, or if you want a guy who has a chance, who looks and plays a lot like Patrick Mahomes. Whether it'll be as good as Patrick Mahomes and Caleb Williams, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, but the tools are there with him. And then you have a third guy in Jaden Daniels, who won the Heisman this year, just a sensational dual threat quarterback. He probably could go number 3 out the board, depending on what happens there with the New England Patriots. Then I'll go into kind of the big risers of the position groups. Offensive tackle number 3. It's a great year to need offensive linemen. Joe Walt, Olaf Ashanu are going to be top 10 guys. And, top 2 rounds, even with offensive tackles, going to be very good. There's a lot of good players in there as well. Another good group that's on the rise, defensive tackle. Another one the Browns need. Jerjon Newton from Illinois looks like the most likely guy. Then after him, you got a bunch of other interesting players. Tavondre Swen, Byron Murphy from Texas, Michigan's Chris Jenkins. They're going to go within the first 2 rounds if they don't go in round number 1, for example. That, I think, is a group that, to me, has took the biggest rise from 2023 to 2024. And that's even with the presence of Jalen Carter last year, who was arguably the most talented player in the entire draft, fell all the way to 9th overall. There's no Jalen Carter in this draft, but defensive tackle is just much stronger this year than it was last year.
All right, so we both agree wide receiver a position in need. So let's take a look at some of the guys that have been shown up out in Mobile. This first guy is from Michigan, Roman Wilson. Take a look at Wilson. Wilson's had, this is a catch today, and it's he beats the DB, and then the quarterback's pass is not good, and he finds a way to come up with a one-handed catch. Tim, Wilson has really shown up first 2 days of practice. What are your thoughts on Roman Wilson?
He's really good. I mean, obviously, Michigan with a national title. I thought he was a piece that, maybe kind of flew under the radar, because when you talk about Michigan and their offense, you're talking about a running offense. They love to run the football with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, but you see in that clip that incredible one-hander, and it looks like he got the knee down, so it would have been an NFL catch right there for Roman Wilson. But guy's got incredible speed, decent size at 6'4", 180. Not the biggest guy, but big enough. I'm not a guy where size is gonna, sway me away from a guy necessarily. Looking at last season, his most productive, 789 yards, 12 touchdowns on 48 catches, just one drop last season. So he's got very sure hands. Might not be a guy, at least in Michigan's offense, that was much of a yards after the catch threat. But in Roman Wilson, I think you're looking for a guy who can add a speed element. And right now, round 3 would kind of be where I'm looking at for, with the Browns picking in the mid to late 80s right now. I think that number might be unofficial till after the Super Bowl. But he's a guy I really like, outside of that group that I think is going to go in the top 50 of the draft.
Here's another one that's really interesting, who is a really good route runner, and we'll see this. Ladd McConkey from Georgia. Just take a look at how difficult. Now, keep in mind, these are like draft-eligible defensive backs that are just having all kinds of issues covering this guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's, in some ways, Ladd McConkey is kind of like Roman Wilson in the way that they are elite receivers who played for running teams, so you really didn't get to see too much of them as far as, a utilized guy. Not guys are going to catch 60, 70 passes that you see at, like, Ohio State or one of these other places. But McConkey, you can see from the highlights, he is fluid, he's fast. But it's not, like, super duper fast, but what you see is he wastes no time getting at the top speed. He can forward and downshift a little bit in speeds, and in some ways that's similar to Josh Downs. I've been seeing, comps to Doug Baldwin. I also kind of think there's a little Tyler Lockett to Ladd McConkey. Again, I've said this before, and I'll probably say this for the next 3 months. There's only one play you need to watch to see Ladd McConkey. It's the double pass that he was supposed to throw against Florida State, but then took it all the way to the other side of the field for about a 30-some yard touchdown. If I'm, an evaluator looking at a player and that's the first play I see, I'm turning off the film because I don't need to see anything else about Ladd McConkey. I mean, that's all you need to see, with just incredible athleticism and a guy who should be more productive in the NFL than he was in college.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up going. Some people have him mocked to the Browns in the second round. All right, this is another one. It's Brendan Rice. He's from USC. Sports Illustrated has the Browns taking him in the 3rd round in their most recent mock draft. It's Jerry Rice's son. Good bloodlines there.
Yeah, I'm big on bloodlines. Bloodlines to me are always, a positive, because obviously they have a resource they can lean on, and a father or somebody in the family that's played in the NFL that can just, throw a whole bunch of advice their way. And with Brendan Rice, I think he's got obviously tremendous size. You look at him, 6'3", 210 pounds, a solid season for USC, 45 catches, 791 yards, 12 touchdowns, only 2 drops on 70 targets this season. So he's gotten better at, protecting the football and, making sure he holds on to it in coverage. What I think is, concern is sometimes he struggles to separate, like you kind of see in that last clip, like right there. I know he caught the touchdown, but even though he has a lot of athletic tools, you want to see him be better at separating. And I think some of that comes down to nuance and how to set up a defender to make him go one way and then you go the other. It's not always about, having that burst or that size. You also have to be able to understand, how to manipulate the defender to get them to go the way you want to. And with Rice, he's gotten better at this other part for his career, but making sure he's consistent game to game. He was in Colorado for the first 2 seasons of his career, and what you saw was he would have a big game and then kind of follow it up with more quiet games. As his career went on, he got better at that kind of minimized, but that's something he's going to need to work on if he's going to have success in the NFL. He's got to be a little more consistent.
Yeah, the one thing you see, physically dominating, though, you kind of saw him pushing the defensive backs around. So, but to your point, you added some separation to that. Now you got the total package. Another guy I know you like, Chris Jenkins, defensive tackle from Michigan. Tell me what you like about him, where you think he may go.
Well, for fans of the show that, go subscribe to our Football Insider newsletter, you'll see me write more about him in the morning. But with Chris Jenkins, again, NFL bloodlines, the son of a former All-Pro in Chris Jenkins, and what he has, tremendous size, 6'3", 305 pounds, not a lot of sacks last season, just 4.5 tackles for loss, so not a lot of individual production. But what he is, he's just a disruptor, and he has incredible power. Bruce Feldman of The Athletic puts out his list of freaks in college football, the most athletic guys. Chris Jenkins made that list. I mean, I think he had something like a 180, 185 pound Turkish getup, which if you ever seen what that looks like, it's a really awkward movement with a dumbbell. Basically, you're on the ground and you have to stand all the way up. Imagine doing that with, 185 pounds. That's impressive to think about, or whatever that weight is. But with Jenkins, incredible athletic tools. I just think he needs to kind of develop more, tools as far as, creating a pass rush plan to really allow him to utilize those tools better. And I think once he figures those out, combined with his ability to stuff the run, you have a guy who can really be a 3-down defensive tackle. Obviously, he may be a guy that falls out of the Browns range because he's one of these guys I think has a chance to really light it up at the combine next month.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and Ogden. Step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, talk a little bit about the Browns' new offensive coordinator and some guys with some contract decisions coming up. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, what did you think of the hiring of Ken Dorsey as the offensive coordinator?
I thought it was interesting. And, I did a piece for cleveland.com the day after, the hiring and the news broke out that, was Ken Dorsey really the problem in Buffalo, or was he the scapegoat? And most of the reaction that I found was they thought, he was kind of the fall guy for some of the issues they had. They were 5-5. They just suffered a shocking Monday night loss in which, they had 12 men on the field on what was a missed field goal opportunity for the Broncos that would have given the Bills the win, but instead they got a second chance they wanted, and Dorsey was fired the next day. And I think when you look at where the Bills were with Dorsey last season prior to the firing, the offensive metrics were better when he was the offensive coordinator versus what they were when Joe Brady took over as the interim, after week 10. And part of that was obviously, maybe they a little more emphasis on running the football, but the problem in Buffalo with Dorsey was, things that weren't in his control, drop passes, interceptions, Josh Allen turning the ball over, things that aren't in the offensive coordinator's control. And, if you're an offensive coordinator, you can only do so much. You can only call the plays. You can't, it's hard to you can't really do anything about turnovers other than try and call more conservative plays to protect your offense, and that's in those situations. But, it was a difficult situation. It obviously worked out for the Bills that they were able to win the AFC East. They got, the second seed. So it worked out for them. But for Dorsey, I think, he got fired for circumstances that seemed like they were out of his control. And, if they kept him throughout the season, who's to say they wouldn't be in the same position, especially if Josh Allen and company were better protecting the football.
Well, one thing that took a hit without question was Stefon Diggs' production. Take a look at this. With Dorsey, 10 games, 73 receptions, 868 yards, 7 touchdowns. Without Dorsey, 9 games, 44 receptions, 388 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, the only metric that the offense improved in was fewer interceptions by Josh Allen, and they ran the ball more effectively. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it ended up working, obviously. One loss down the rest of the stretch, that 5-game gauntlet they had at the end of the regular season, they won out of it to get to the playoffs. So they did what they had to do necessarily. And obviously, when you look at those numbers, obviously at the expense of Stephon Diggs, from my own rough math, 7.3 receptions a game down to fewer than 5. And, having 1 touchdown over 9 games compared to 7, obviously, tells me they weren't throwing the ball as much. They were getting James Cook more involved in the run game, and that made sense because Cook is, really underrated. And, they have multitudes of weapons, Gabe Davis, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir looked like he really took a step up, with Joe Brady's the offensive coordinator. But when Stephon Diggs is that big money guy in Buffalo and he's not being the highlighted guy, there's certainly reasons for it. Whether it was just, the shift of the offense to a more run-focused system, or whether they were more focused in just trying to spread the ball out, that's something that might be concerning. But with the Browns, I think it's more interesting if they do spread the ball out, because obviously you have Amari Cooper, you have David Njoku. As out of the backfield, you have Jerome Ford, who's proven himself as a solid receiving running back. So it'll be interesting what kind of input Ken Dorsey has on the offense as far as what kind of targets they would add in the offseason.
All right, before I let you go, this is from the Bleacher Report. Contracts the Browns must consider cutting before the 2024 season. They go with Ogbo Okoronkwo. I can't see this one, but the Browns have just over $30 million committed to Garrett, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Okoronkwo next season. Okoronkwo's contract easiest to get rid of because he's the cheapest of the 3 deals. Salary cap casualty if the Browns can't restructure some deals to become more compliant. They can, so that's not going to happen. Elijah Moore scheduled to make $1.8 million in 2024, the final year of his rookie contract he signed with the Jets. Contract length could be the reason why the Browns let Moore go in the offseason. I don't see that one happening either. Jordan Akins has potential to opt out of his contract this offseason, would come with $315,000 in dead cap money. That would be cheaper than paying him $2.3 million in salary to be Njoku's backup, primarily help with the blocking in the running game. Yeah, Tim, I don't see any of those happening, especially Okoronkwo. I think they're thrilled with him. Guy played with a torn bicep to get back into the playoff game.
Yeah, and before he got injured, there was a lot to really love about him. He was a guy who it seemed like he's an under the radar asset, but the Browns picked him up, and obviously, he came out and performed the way he did. Again, 4.5 sacks last season. I can't imagine he's going anywhere, especially if the Browns aren't able to sign Darius Smith. Then you may have to move Okoronkwo into the starting lineup if you don't find a replacement for Darius Smith. Maybe you have a competition between Obo and Alex Ray for that number 2 spot at defensive end. But yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Even looking at his cap number is not very high for Okoronkwo in 2024. Looking at it right now, just a shade over $4 million. So that's not even a lot of cap room that he's taking up to begin with. And then you look at Elijah Moore. He's in the last year of his rookie deal. If you decide not to keep him after the season, so be it. But there's no reason to move on from a guy in a rookie deal who's just in the final year of a second-round contract in Elijah Moore. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. I thought he was fine last season. I thought he got hurt by having 5 different quarterbacks starting games for the Browns over the course of the season, just not having the ability to build a lot of continuity. And I think ultimately the role he started the season in was different than the one he ended the season in. They took him away from being kind of the Deebo Samuel type player to a more conventional slot receiver. And I thought that was a smart decision on the Browns' part. Jordan Akins, it would really only make sense because, you have Harrison Bryant, who I believe is also a free agent at the end of this season, is also a free agent. So if you move on from Akins, then you only have really one tight end right now, David Njoku. And that could easily be replaceable. You could just draft the tight end. In day 3, they have 5 picks in day 3, 2 fifth-round picks, and there's a tight end group where there's going to be a lot of guys available in day 3. Those guys usually slide. So if you're really looking to pick up a cheaper tight end, maybe you do that. And I mean, you still keep Jordan Akins around because of the chemistry he has with Deshaun Watson. So you're right. I mean, none of those three seem like they'd be realistic cut choices, but of the three, Akins is the only one that even feels moderately realistic to me.
Agreed, totally. Tim Bielik, Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, as always. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in one. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
Sports4CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Cavs getting ready to face the Detroit Pistons. Darius Garland back in the uniform, set to return to the lineup tonight. J.B. Bickerstaff admits there will be some adjustments for Donovan Mitchell. Mitchell has been outstanding with the ball in his hand in Garland's absence, but with Garland returning, there will be some adjustments.
It's Donovan, and he's a complete basketball player, and it's simple as that. He's not a one-dimensional guy, but obviously when Darius comes back, Darius is going to have the ball in his hands as well. So guys just have to continue to play the right way and keep sharing the ball. And we keep sharing the ball. There's enough touches out there for everybody. So you move it, pass it to the open man. I think that's what Donovan has done a phenomenal job of, is helping his teammates get better. And I think those two guys can make each other better. They take pressure off one another and can create some easier opportunities for one another as well.
With that, let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Sam, it's a good problem to have that you have too many good players. Having said that, is there going to be an adjustment period so they can figure out how this works best?
You would think there would be at least a small adjustment because obviously since Darius Garland's been out, they've been on quite a tear, having won 10 of 11 and beating the Bucks in Milwaukee, and then the Clippers at home, snapping the Clippers' 5-game winning streak. And a lot of that is because Donovan Mitchell has been fantastic, obviously not just at scoring, but, had 12 assists against the Clippers with Garland out. He's twice matched his career high with 13 assists. And as I said, along with the scoring. So Mitchell's really been facilitating, filling in at the point guard spot. And now you're going to move him back over to the 2-guard. But, J.B. Bickerstaff just said it. As long as you continue to share the basketball, it doesn't really matter who's setting up the offense, whether it's Garland or Mitchell or who's bringing the ball up the floor and facilitating. As long as they continue to do those things with Darius Garland, which I'm assuming they're going to be able to do because he is a point guard and he does help facilitate, I think they'll be in good shape. But, yeah, it might be a little bit of an adjustment. Not just for Garland and Mitchell, but some of the other guys as well that are feeding off of Mitchell.
What about the rotation? Who gets the minutes? And I would imagine, well, we know Mobley's on a minute restriction, but who gets squeezed? Whose minutes get squeezed a little?
I think we're going to see, Sam Merrill. I know a lot of fans aren't happy to hear that, but he's probably the guy who's going to not play as much. Look, in the NBA, you play about 8 guys, the most of your minutes. Maybe a 9th man gets 10 minutes or so. And if you're talking the Cavs, you're talking, their core 4, Max Strus, and then Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert, and George Niang are going to get a ton of minutes, you would think, off the bench. So there's 8 guys right there, and there's probably room for a 9th guy. And that's going to depend a lot on matchups. And it could be Merrill. The data shows that when he's on the floor, even when he's not scoring, he's creating space. Dean Wade has been magnificent when he was filling in for Mobley in terms of, his defense, not forcing a thing. The great thing about Dean Wade is he's a guy who doesn't need the ball to make an impact. He doesn't really care if he gets it. So, right there, I just named 10 players. Somebody's probably going to be out. Now, the good news is, you always have opportunities for matchups where one player may come off the bench as your ninth man. If you need some outside shooting, that's obviously going to be Merrill. And the better news than that is the fact that, the reason you want to go 10 or 11 deep as the Cavs do isn't so that you play 10 or 11 guys every game. It's so that you have the luxury of using those guys and they're game ready in the event they need to be called on in case of injury. We see this is the NBA season and this is the Cavs, and there's been plenty of injuries and plenty of opportunities for guys such as Merrill, Craig Porter Jr., Dean Wade, who's been starting. You see that those opportunities are going to be there for those guys from time to time, and they just have to be ready when it is.
Well, since December 16th, Cavs an NBA best 15-4, so that's 79% winning percentage. Go for their 8th straight win at home tonight when they face the Pacers. They have the Pistons rather. They have 9 games before the NBA All-Star break. Only 2 of them come against teams with winning records, home against Kings and the 76ers. So, Sam, I guess the question is, how important is this stretch before the All-Star break for the Cavs to take advantage of? And is it an opportunity to even kind of sneak into, one of those top 3 or 4 spots?
Yeah, right now we've seen, the New York Knicks have, as we speak, are on an 8-game winning streak. They were 14-2 in January since making that trade. Now they're in the number 3 spot in the Eastern Conference. Cavs are in 4. The Philadelphia 76ers have dropped to 5th. So, there's a real good opportunity for the Cavs. They have not only a light schedule coming up, as you mentioned, before the All-Star break, and the trade deadline, but they also have one of the easiest schedules remaining for the rest of the season. So, the idea is you got to take care of business against these teams, such as the Pistons that you have at home. And, some of these other games, you're going on the road. You want to steal some of those. They have Washington coming up, which is a very winnable game. So there are a lot of reasons that they should be able to keep this thing going. Problem is, of course, this is the NBA and anything can happen on any given night. We saw that when the Portland Trailblazers came to Cleveland and beat the Cavs. So, you just have to approach each game, act as if it's almost like a Game 7 in the playoffs, regardless of who you're playing, just to stay ahead and maybe gain some ground in the Eastern Conference.
This from CBSSports.com. NBA trade deadline goals for each team. For the Cavs, another reliable 3-and-D wing. How they can accomplish the goal, they could flip LeVert into a slightly shootier guard like Gary Trent Jr., Bogdan Bogdanovic for only second-round picks. Keep an eye on Kelly Olynyk as well. Just your thoughts on the Cavs and potentially trading.
I'll sum it up for you in 2 words. No trades. You win 10 of 11 and 15 of 19, and you're the hottest team in the Eastern Conference other than maybe the Knicks. There's no reason to part with a guy. Now if you could potentially go out and get a veteran wing or a veteran big man while Tristan Thompson's suspended for a second-round pick or a couple of second-round picks, then sure, go ahead and do that. I just don't think that you want to move anybody off a team that's playing as well as they are right now. They've just beat 2, championship contenders in the Bucks and the Clippers, and everything's flowing right now, and I wouldn't mess with that too much. I think the Cavs are more likely to try to pick somebody up off the buyout market right after the trade deadline on February 8th, which is a week from Thursday. And you can pick up a guy, once all these pieces and parts move, somebody gets bought out all the time. And you know, if you're the Cavs, you might be able to sign somebody for cheap. You might be able to look at the free agent list, a list of available free agents, guys who have been available most of the year. But I do think that they really could use, obviously, another big guy in the sense that Tristan Thompson's out for 25 games. And, you know, you're going to need somebody big to back up Allen and Mobley during this stretch here after the All-Star break. So I wouldn't make a trade. I wouldn't move anybody off of this roster right now because you finally have everybody understanding their roles and everything's cohesive. And there's really not a move out there that's going to really move the needle for them where you want to break things up.
All right, before I let you go, this one this is player most likely to be traded on each NBA team. From ESPN, they say Caris LeVert, having a strong season as team sixth man. Cavs aren't actively looking to trade him, but contract signed last year, 2 years, $32 million, designed to be movable. Let me ask you this. What kind of player would it take for the Cavs to be offered to trade Caris LeVert? Say somebody says, we like LeVert. We think he's young enough. He can help us. He'd be a starter. What kind of player do you think they would take in order to trade Caris LeVert?
Yeah, they would want a 3-and-D wing guy. You know, a guy who, as that report said earlier, is a guy who's a little quote-unquote shootier. You know, somebody who can knock down perimeter shots, which LeVert can do from time to time and does a nice job of. He also facilitates. So I think that you'd be, you know, real hesitant to give him up, especially because he does have a movable, friendly contract, and that's something that you could reevaluate after the season. But if you did, that's who they'd want. They'd want somebody who's, you know, a little bit more considered of a dead-eye shooter. Bogdanovich from Atlanta, I think, was a name that was mentioned. I'm hearing the Hawks want to hang on to him. I think he leads the Eastern Conference in three-pointers made. So, I mean, those are the kind of guys that you would be looking at. You'd want to make a splash if you move LeVert, and I just don't. They're not going to just move him to move him because obviously they really like him and he offers a lot when it comes to not only hitting outside shots, but his defense is pretty good. And he can penetrate and facilitate for others as well. And he's a you know, bucket off the bench.
Sam Amico, hoopswire.com, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Sam.
All right. Thanks for having me, Dave. We will chat at you soon.
Sounds good. Sam Amico, hoopswire.com. Make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff throughout the entire NBA, especially the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.